on Your Excellency, members of the academia present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen that have linked up from all corners of the world, and members of the Nigerian Global Roundtable, and members of the African Petroleum Producers Organization present, you are all welcome. I would also like to recognize the chairman of NIDO and all the chapter chairs and all other organizations present. Once again, you are all welcome to this important webinar on the African Petroleum Producers Organization and challenges of the African petroleum industry. As you know, the Nigerian economy has been faltering due to the reduction in the income from our oil sector. So why is this so? Perhaps we shall get to understand some of the issues at the end of this important webinar. I am Dr. James Edobo, an economist and the convener of the Nigerian Global Roundtable, your chief host for today. My co-host is Dr. Camillus Konkwo. Before going on to introduce our guest speaker and the panelists, let me say a few words on who the Nigerian Global Roundtable are. The Nigerian Global Roundtable is an NGO think tank aimed at pursuing good governance and accountability to facilitate the economic empowerment and overall development of Nigeria and Africa at large. The Think and Do NGO is a legal entity registered in Vienna, Austria, but draws its membership from distinguished Nigerian professionals from across the world. And now, I have the honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker and discussants. So let me start with our distinguished guest speaker. Omar Faruq Ibrahim holds a doctorate degree in political science from Rogers University, New Brunswick, New Jersey, in the USA. He holds a master's degree from Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria, and a bachelor's degree from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, also in Nigeria. Dr. Ibrahim assumed the position of APO Secretary General on 4th January 2020. Until then, he was advisor on international energy relations to the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In that position, he represented Nigeria on the boards of several intergovernmental energy organizations. He was Nigeria's governor to the Vienna-based Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and executive board member at the Dow-based Gas Exporting Countries Forum. At the same time, he coordinated Nigeria's affairs at the International Energy Forum and later the African Petroleum Producers Association. Dr. Ibrahim was between 2010 and 2014 General Manager and later Group General Manager and Group Public Affairs Division at the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC. Before joining the NNPC, Dr. Ibrahim spent 7 years as head of the Public Relations Information Department and member of senior management at the OPEC Secretariat in Vienna. He was the executive editor of the OPEC Energy Review and editor-in-chief of the OPEC Bulletin. Before venturing into the oil sector in 2003, Dr. Ibrahim was in the media where he was at the various times the managing director and chief executive officer of the Nigerian Federal Government-owned media house, the New Nigerian Newspapers. He was also the chairman of the board of directors of NewPac, Printing and Packaging Company Limited. Before going to the new Nigerian, Dr. Faruq had spent 9 years in various positions at the Daily Times of Nigeria, ranging from member of the editorial board to a columnist and op-ed editor, general manager, Niger Park Press, group controller of administration. Dr. Faruq joined Bayero University as a graduate assistant in the Department of Political Science in 1981 after his national service and rose to the rank of lecturer by the time he left academia for journalism in 1990. He has a number of publications. Our discussants. The first I would like to introduce to you is Chief Ambassador Dr. Kamilis Konkwo. He is a Nigerian citizen living in Europe for almost 40 years. He holds an MA in economics from the University of Innsbruck and PhD in business administration from University of Economics and Business Administration, Vienna, Austria. He attended a post-PhD training in economic diplomacy at diplomatic academies, Austria, France, and Spain. He served the United Nations, New York, in Kosovo, etc., in professional capacities. He is a lecturer at Danube University, Krems, MBA program. He served the Embassy of the Kingdom of Thailand and other diplomatic organizations. He is the CEO of Holymood Global Bridge Limited. He is the president of St. Camilo's Life Care Foundation and an ambassador of Peace, Universal Peace Federation. Now, Dr. Tanosha, who is the next discussant I would like to introduce to you. Monico Benedict Tanosha is a registered engineer with a PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. He is a corporate member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers with over 19 years cognate technical experience in the industry, such as Dunlop Group Companies, Palmol Nigeria Limited, and 11 years teaching and competency training practice. He has skills and interests in advanced manufacturing technology, for example, laser-based manufacturing, sustainable production systems like CAD and CAM, remanufacture, mechanical design modeling, artificial intelligence solutions, and enterprise development. Dr. Monico is an academic staff of the Federal University of Petroleum Resources, EFURO, with the abbreviation FUPRE, and heads FUPRE Consults Limited, which is in the office of the Vice Chancellor. Having served as the Assistant Head of Mechanical Engineering between 2016 and 2018, Dr. Tanosha represents FUPRE in various strategic and collaborative ventures, remanufacturing of new components from end-of-life parts using hybrid selective laser melting speed machine process, in conjunction with Stellenbosch University, South Africa, and Botswana International University of Science and Technology in Botswana, with research grant awarded by Center for Scientific and Industrial Research, also South Africa, in 2018. That includes project grants holder on biogas for energy and off-grid power, implemented through a hub and spoke model funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering UK in conjunction with Anglo-American Group Foundation and Global Challenge Research Fund. Dr. Tanosha is passionate about research innovation in collaboration with industry, youth empowerment, through education and competency trainings and sustainable enterprise development. Dr. Tanosha is substantive MD, CEO of Fupre Energy Solutions Nigeria Limited, and he is a member of the Governing Council of the Federal University of Petroleum Resources, FORO, and serves as Assistant Chairman, Fupre Governing Council Committee on Public-Private Partnership. He has fellowship, membership of several professional bodies and affiliations. Dr. Anjem Edobo. Dr. Anjem Edobo has 27 years experience working in the oil and gas industry, having worked in different regions of the world, including Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. He is currently Technical Director at FirmLink International Limited in Aberdeen, Scotland. Dr. Edobo has contributed significantly to discussions on the effective harnessing of hydrocarbon resources in Africa. For the past 12 years, Dr. Edobo has been a visiting lecturer at the Institute of Petroleum Studies, University of Port Harcourt, Rivers State, where he lectures in production enhancement as well as refining and petrochemicals. Dr. Edobo is a member of many professional bodies, including the Society of Petroleum Engineers. Dr. Edobo is a European Chartered Scientist. I welcome you all, sirs, to this event that I hope will produce some valuable takeaways at the end of the webinar. We hope this will be the beginning of long-term mutual relationship between the Apple and the Nigerian Global Roundtable. Before I hand over to Dr. Faruq Ibrahim, let me just mention that while the guest speaker and discussant are speaking, all microphones shall be muted. Participants shall have the opportunity to ask questions or make brief contributions. All participants can use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. Kindly avoid talking until you have been called upon to do so. Thank you. May I now call on Dr. Ibrahim to start his presentation, please. Thank you. So over to you now, Dr. Ibrahim.
The background to the invitation was a conversation I had with John early this year, where I mentioned to him that I had moved from Abuja to Brazzaville, where I worked for Apple as Secretary General. John did not seem to know anything about Apple. Naturally, he asked me if Apple is a new organization, whether it was Africa's version of OPEC, and what exactly Apple does. I gave John some background to the founding of Apple, what the organization does, and the challenges that the African petroleum industry faces. A few days later, John called to ask if I could give a talk to this group on the challenges of the petroleum industry in Africa as Apple sees it, and I gladly accepted the invitation. I shall therefore be speaking about Apple, its founding, its aims and objectives, membership and structure. I will also speak about a century of the petroleum industry in Africa, the first 65 years up to 2015, and the next 35 years up to 2050. In the first 65 years, I intend to look at the growth of the industry, the nature of that growth, the challenges and the prospects. I will look at how the emergence of oil in many African countries changed not just the economy, but also the social fabric of society. I will then look at the next phase, that is the post-Paris Climate Change Agreement of 2015, popularly called COP21, and the commitments given by world leaders to aggressively pursue policies and programs aimed at zero emissions of greenhouse gases. What is now euphemistically called energy transition, to see what will change and what will remain the same, and how these energy dynamics are going to affect the future of the industry on the African continent. Finally, I will discuss some of the opportunities that we find in these challenges and how Africa is exploiting these opportunities. I expect a robust discussion from this very knowledgeable group of professionals from Africa who daily agonize over the fate of Africa, knowing very well that the continent has all it needs to become developed and industrialized. We value your contributions to our search for a better future for our continent. Background to the creation of Apple. The idea for the creation of APA came about in the 1980s through informal meetings among the African member countries of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, namely Algeria, Gabon, Libya, and Nigeria. This was in response to the spiral rise in international oil prices from the 1970s, a situation which seriously affected the balance of payments of many developing countries. In response to that development, OPEC had, in 1976, established the OPEC Fund for International Development, whose mandate was to assist non-OPEC developing countries with balance of payment challenges to secure oil supplies for the effective operations of their economy. The African member countries of OPEC noted that African countries were most hurt by the rise in oil prices, but that the OPEC fund could not solve the problems of all the affected countries. It was this realization by the above listed 4 member countries that spurred them into action. Thus, these 4 countries agreed to provide oil to African countries that needed oil but could not import it because of balance of payment difficulties. They agreed to reserve 4% of their production to meet the needs of their colleagues on the African continent. The first meeting of this group of 4 took place in Libreville, Gabon, in October 1984. Thereafter, consultations were made with other oil-producing non-OPEC African states to bring them into the fold. And in June 1985, in Brioni, former Yugoslavia, another meeting was held. It was at that meeting in Brioni that the leaders formally decided to found the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APA. Following that important decision, Libreville, Gabon, once again hosted the first formal meeting of representatives of the founding countries to draft the association's statute. That meeting took place on the 21st and 22nd of April 1986. On 27th January 1987, 8 African oil-producing countries, namely Algeria, Angola, Benin Republic, Cameroon, Congo, Gabon, Libya, Nigeria, these are the founding members, met in Lagos to formally found the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APA. The vision of the association at that time was to position APA as an instrument for fostering consultation and cooperation among the African petroleum producing countries in the areas of development of hydrocarbon resources. According to the statute of the association released in Lagos in January 1987, The objectives of the African Petroleum Producers Association were as follows. 1. Promotion of cooperation among its member countries in hydrocarbon exploration, production, refining, petrochemical, manpower development, acquisition and adaptation of technology and legal matters. 2. Promotion of technical assistance among member countries in the areas in which individual member countries have acquired valuable experience. 3. Coordination of marketing policies and strategies of member countries through exchange of information with the aim of safeguarding their depletable resources and realizing equitable revenue from exports. Finally, number 4, increase the understanding of energy situation and policies in member countries through cooperation with a view to meeting domestic energy needs, and finally, studying ways and means of providing assistance to net oil African countries to meet their energy needs. As we speak today, 34 years after its creation, the membership of APA has nearly doubled from what it was in 1987. We now have 15 member countries, namely Democratic People's Republic of Algeria, Republic of Angola, Republic of Benin, Republic of Cameroon, Republic of Chad, Congo, DRC, Arab Republic of Egypt, Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Republic of Gabon, Republic of Ivory Coast, Libya, Niger Republic, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the Republic of South Africa. In addition to these 15, we also have 3 observer nations, namely Ghana, Mauritania, and the Sudan. The headquarters of APO is in Brazzaville, Republic of Congo. The Secretariat was temporarily located to Abuja in April 2018 and October 2020 to facilitate a major institutional reform of the organization. One of the outcomes of that reform was the change of name from African Petroleum Producers Association, APA, to the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO. During the course of the reform exercise, and in the light of the new realities and challenges that have emerged on the global oil and gas scene, and the peculiar challenges of the industry on the African continent, the organization's leaders took another critical look at its mission and vision and guiding principles and adapted them to address the new reality. APO now stands to promote cooperation in the field of hydrocarbons for its member countries and other global institutions to foster fruitful collaboration and partnership while utilizing petroleum as a catalyst for energy security, sustainable development, and economic diversification of Africa. APO therefore aspires to be the world's major institution of reference on Africa's hydrocarbon matters, focusing on the promotion of cooperation and collaboration in the development of petroleum policies among its member countries, as well as the development of cross-border, regional, and interregional energy infrastructure on the continent. A century of the petroleum industry in Africa, the first 65 years. Before looking at the petroleum industry in Africa in the 20th century, it will be fruitful to briefly take a look at the contribution of the industry to the industrial and economic growth of Europe and the United States, especially from the late 19th century on to the first half of the 20th century. Economic historians are agreed that the discovery and use of petroleum as energy source in the 19th century marked the beginning of the end of the first industrial revolution, which was characterized by cottage industry, Oil energy made possible the automation in assembly plants, which in turn facilitated mass production of consumer goods. Mass production of consumer goods ensured bigger supply, which in turn made goods more affordable. Greater access to consumer goods by a greater number of the population meant better living conditions. And better living conditions translated to greater purchasing power and more purchases, which made for more production and improvement in the methods of production. Hence, the rapid increase in the living standards of the peoples of Europe and the United States during this period. Oil revolutionized the means of transportation, of communication, of food production, medicine, and indeed all facets of human life. According to OPEC, the increasing availability of petroleum energy made it possible for global industrial production to grow 50 times in the 20th century, and that 80% of that growth took place post-World War II. The reconstruction of Europe after the war could not have succeeded the way it did without the contribution of petroleum. Furthermore, all the economic activities were concentrated in the Organization for European Economic Cooperation countries, the precursor to the current OECD countries. It is important to highlight the key role played by petroleum in the development of today's developed economies as we discuss the strident call by these countries for an end to global use of oil by the middle of the 21st century. Oil exploration started in Africa in the early years of the 20th century, but effective production started about mid-century. In the 60 years or so since production started, nearly 45% of the countries on the continent have found oil. Together, Africa has over 100 billion barrels of oil, or about 10% of global sovereign reserves. At the same time, Africa accounts for about 8% of global oil production. Afro member countries control over 90% of Africa's oil and gas reserves and production. For the largest part of Africa's involvement in the petroleum industry, external interests, essentially international oil companies, have played the dominant role in exploration, production, processing, and marketing of Africa's crude oil. African states did not have the capacity, technological, financial, and human resource capability to man the new industry. Furthermore, for most governments, the quest for oil was more for the foreign exchange revenue that it would bring to the government than for the use of that resource to develop a petroleum-based industry in the country. That was why the announcement of oil fines was always preceded by the award of contracts to construct pipelines from the source of that oil to the port. To most African countries, oil is meant to be evacuated to the other parts of the world in exchange for dollars to support the national budget. Irrespective of the arrangements in place, PSC, JVC, service contract, or concession, the goal has always been the same: how to get foreign exchange to operate the national budget. In many cases, the revenue earned from petroleum exploitation have not been channeled to seriously grow content in the industry or diversify the economy away from over-dependence on oil revenue. Admittedly, a few countries have made strident efforts at local content development and have recorded huge successes. A few more have tried to diversify with some measure of success. But with a few exceptions, all these countries have been operating in silos, either with regard to local content or economic diversification. Why they look beyond their borders, it is not to other African countries that they look to, but to extra-continental entities. Hence, even those countries that have made success in local content and economic diversification still rely to a large extent on foreign direct investment for the growth and development of the industry in their home country. For most African countries with the potential for oil resources, as with other developing countries with similar potential, the very capacity to explore and identify where oil is in their territory is absent. They therefore rely on external companies with the capacity to locate where the oil is and, in most cases, to produce it. In Africa, 5 different types of relationships or contracts between the host country and the external entities that find and produce oil can be established. Concession, joint venture, production sharing, service contract, or a hybrid of these. The main variable among these contract types is the extent of state control over private oil company operations, with concessions having the least state control and service contracts having the most. The type of contract in existence has an impact on how the country develops the industry. A study conducted by Apple established that globally, 60 countries operate concessions, 20 operate JVs, 41 operate CSC, 4 operate service contracts, and 16 use a hybrid of the above. That same study also showed that the types of contract in operation are normally not mutually exclusive. A country could be operating 2 or more types of contracts. For example, in 8 Apple member countries, we found that concessions, 8 countries operate concession contracts, 14 operate CSCs, and 4 operate service contracts. For the half of a century that some African countries have found and produced oil, and despite the successes they have recorded in local content and the emergence of wealthy capitalists in these economies, none of these countries can claim to have established the capacity to handle the processes of the whole petroleum value chain, from crude oil exploration to distribution of final products. This is not surprising because the government, as well as the business community, have seen oil as a source of quick money. No one was thinking beyond the immediate or for the future generations. That explains why 60 years after some countries have established refineries, they are unable to maintain them, despite the thousands of petroleum engineers, some with PhD degrees, that they have been producing for over half a century. There is no doubt that the emergence of petroleum as a revenue source in African countries has had a huge impact, not just on the national economy, but also on the social fabric of society. While admitting that oil revenue has helped to provide social services and infrastructure, it has also exacerbated class distinction in most African oil-producing countries by creating a small elite living on oil money, while the vast majority still wallow in poverty. Indeed, the oil industry in Africa is one place whose remuneration compares favorably or even better than what exists in other continents. Meanwhile, the dependency continues. The next 35 years, that is up to 2050. The realities of the African oil and gas industry in the phase 2 are the following. The oil and gas industry is highly capital intensive, significant but little explored oil and gas potential, huge dependence on external interests for the operation of the oil and gas industry, huge dependence on foreign direct investment for the growth and survival of the oil and gas industry, absence of key modern energy processing and logistics infrastructure like reception, storage, transportation, distribution, etc., especially between and among countries and regions, heavy dependence on crude oil and gas revenue for the running of government and the provision of social services, heavy dependence on foreign technology and on international markets for Africa's sale of commodities, mono-economy, failure to diversify the national or regional economies, absence or near absence of interstate trade among African countries. Sub-Saharan Africa has the largest proportion of the world's population living without access to modern energy, and this figure is put at about 600 million people, a young and growing population which is projected to reach 2 billion by 2050, and therefore greater than that of Europe and the Americas combined. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the stark realities facing us as we move into between now and 2050. To fully appreciate the threat that the successful implementation of the Paris Climate Change Agreement will have on African oil-producing countries, it is apt to enumerate some of the objectives of that agreement. Chief among them is Target 20-20-20. The agreement aims to have global greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 20% by the year 2020 compared to 1990 levels. Secondly, it aims to increase the use of renewables by 20% within the same time period. It targets zero emissions by 2050. To achieve these objectives, the developed countries have rolled out the following programs. 1. Fossil fuel divestment. Both governmental and corporate levels, deliberate policies are being introduced to discourage investment in fossil fuels. This is evident in recent decisions by a number of global financial institutions, as well as international oil companies in their long-term investment strategies, where investments in hydrocarbons, especially in the upstream, are being reduced. One of the key implications of this development is the stalling of new technologies for exploration, production, and processing of crude oil. Even the continuation of the existing technologies cannot be guaranteed, as spare parts may not be readily available in the near future. 2. Penalties on the use of fossil fuels. Related to divestment in fossil fuels is the issue of penalties imposed on the use of fossil fuels. Today, the governments of the developed countries, especially Europe and the United States, make more money from a barrel of crude oil than what the governments of oil-producing and exporting countries make in the name of taxes and penalties. Subsidies on renewables. Even though the developed countries have been advising against subsidies, they annually budget huge amounts of money to subsidize renewable energy use. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the implications of the success of the objectives of the Paris Climate Change Agreement is that poor countries that have been blessed with abundant oil resources, like Afro member countries, cannot use that resource to develop their economy because they do not have the capital nor the technology to develop it. Furthermore, even if they are able to produce a crude, there will not be market for it, either because discriminatory policies would have succeeded in eliminating whatever cost advantage it has over renewables over time, or global paradigm shift against fossil fuels has made its use unpopular, or more stringent penalties will be imposed and enforced on countries that deal with fossil fuels. Already, by penalizing investors in the industry or starving of investable funds through deliberate and discriminatory policies, the end of the oil era is being brought closer, even when more oil finds are being made. What is the way forward for Africa oil producing countries? Afro member countries have been particularly concerned about the fate of the main source of their revenue in the face of the aggressive determination of the world, especially since the change in leadership in the White House. A major study on the future of the oil and gas industry in Africa in the light of COVID-19 and COP21 has been commissioned by Apple Council of Ministers. In the meantime, the organization realized that not much could be done without financial resources, and also acknowledged that the way forward for the industry on the continent is through cooperation and collaboration in the provision of cross-border and interregional energy infrastructure, established the Africa Energy Investment Corporation, ICOP. Its objectives are to mobilize financial resources within and outside Africa for the development of the African energy sector. Although established by African state governments, ICOP is to be run as a business concern and will have the private sector controlling majority shareholding. It shall focus on the development of energy infrastructure that cuts across Africa and the regions of Africa. It shall also focus on the development of energy infrastructure with multiplier effect on the regional and continental economy. In addition to pooling, I have here what ICOP really stands for: its vision, project priorities, the structure, investors, what they should expect, what we expect in terms of funds and our investment plans, and so on. In addition to pooling resources together, Afro member countries have also resolved to intensify collaboration and cooperation in research in the energy sector. They have therefore revised the Committee of Heads of Research Institutions of Afro member countries. The Forum of Chief Executives of National Oil Companies have also been created. Recognizing the fundamental changes taking place on the global energy scene, where the world has become more and more interdependent, AFO has now developed collaboration and cooperation with strategic partners to pursue. For example, we have the Africa OPEC Energy Dialogue. This is something that we initiated together with the African Refining and Distribution Association and the AFREC, a body of the African Commission. In our efforts to collaborate with other government and non-governmental agencies to pursue what we believe in the best interest of our continent, APO collaborated with ECOWAS and ARDA to finance some studies which were completed early last year. These included a study on the popularization of LPG as domestic gas in West Africa, a study on the harmonization of sulfur content in motor fuels used in the West Africa sub-region, and a feasibility study on the expansion of the West Africa gas pipeline that currently runs from Nigeria through Benin Republic, Togo, and terminates in Ghana. We plan to have this pipeline going all the way to Senegal, all the way down, coming back to Mali and Burkina Faso. Similarly, we are also embarking into various collaborative and cooperative endeavors with other institutions. We are doing similar things in East Africa and also in Southern Africa and in the Maghreb. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here and I'll be pleased to have a robust discussion on the challenges of the oil and gas industry of Africa and the way forward from what I believe is a distinguished, eminent personality with a lot of gray hair to help us guide us in Africa. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Ibrahim, for this comprehensive presentation and information on the creation of the Apple, the history, and where we are now. So thank you very much for this presentation. Before we go on to ask the various discussants to make contribution, I would like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Ambassador Heman, the Nigerian ambassador to Austria, who is also here with us. So you are acknowledged, sir, and you are welcome. Let's move on to Dr. Camilo Skunkwo to please just make a brief remark on what Dr. Ibrahim Faruq Ibrahim has presented. And if there's any comment you wish to make, so please do so before we move to the other discussants, or any contribution you wish to make.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful presentation, Dr. Omar Faruq. That is a very, very elaborate and interesting presentation that provided a lot of background information on the creation and history of the African Petroleum Producers Organization. Of particular interest is the part of your presentation dealing with the realities, the current realities of the African petroleum sector. You have asserted that it has been over the years dominated by external interests, especially the exploration, the production, the processing, and even the marketing of African crude oil has been dominated by multinational companies. You have also stated as reality that there is no technological, financial, and human resource capacity to drive an intra-African, an African-driven oil industry development. There is absolutely no participation in the entire value chain of the African industry, judging from your from the realities you described. You also stated that foreign interests make all the money, and the oil-producing governments, oil-producing country governments, hardly make any profit from, or less profit than the external interests. These are very, very alarming. This is a very alarming description of the status of the African petroleum industry. Question is, what is Apple doing to change these realities, to reduce the extent of dominance of foreign interests in the African oil industry? Thank you.
I would suggest, Dr. Ibrahim, that you do not answer every single questions, so we are going to take a few more, the other panelists to also make comments, so that when you answer, you just answer a few, questions together, or respond to the contributions together. Move on to Dr. Monico to please make his remarks and his comment, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones Edobo. I thank Dr. Omar Faruq Ibrahim.
Of course, Dr. Tanosha, I'm sorry, if I just, so please go on, sorry.
Okay, my name is Monico Tanosha.
Yes, yes.
I want to thank the presenter. It's quite enlightening. And instead of, I thank you for also preferring a headway in terms of the finance hub that will help Africa. Instead of mourning, for us in academia, ours is how do we do more of in-country utilization of capacity to build the industry. My question and also my focus will be, how do we change the narrative, knowing that there is an international, instead of saying gang up, how do we look at what opportunities will be very good for Nigeria and also the Apple members, so that they can build in-country capacity and utilize it for the oil and gas sector. It's obvious that finance is a key factor, but if we leverage on technology, especially most of us at this roundtable that in diaspora, how do we leverage on technology, the ones that either build or so that we change the narrative from being reliant on foreign technology and build our local industry. For example, in terms of the downstream sector, how do we make more refineries, either artisanal or modular, in Nigeria for in-country production of petroleum products to serve our growing masses and also the West African sub-region. This should be our focus. I quite align with you, but my main focus is how does Apple encourage institutions like universities, like my university, to build more in-country utilization of capacity in the oil and gas sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanosha. May I call on Dr. Anjem Edobo to perhaps also give his first remarks, or contribution. Thank you. Dr. Anjem Edobo, please.
Thank you, Dr. Edobo. And I want to say a special thank you to Dr. Ibrahim for an excellent presentation. The oil industry is something that is very strategic to Africa. And it's good to hear that Apple is doing the good things they are doing. It will rather appear that maybe better late than never. In terms of the presentation, I'm particularly impressed by the effort that Apple is making in synergizing. The speaker mentioned that in the past, the African countries or producers have been operating in silos, which is quite true. The issue of the switch away from hydrocarbons is something very frightening and alarming to us African countries that depend on oil. And I think one of the problems that we have is that we didn't think of diversifying the industry early enough. In particular, we focus on selling crude oil with little value rather than adding value in country, in continent. The case of Nigeria, especially, although people focus on the refineries, but what should have given us a lot of leverage was if we had developed the petrochemical industry to a very high level. At the moment, almost everything that is petrochemically based, we import. And that is a very serious flaw, something that should have been done a long time ago. Indeed, the then military governments at that time had a very good intention in setting up these plants. I personally think that the technocrats that advised the government at that time were very narrow in the scope of these industries. You need two major industries to be able to develop. You need the iron and steel industry, you need the petrochemicals. Some of us may remember in the days of Gaddafi when sanctions were placed on Libya. What sustained Libya was their petrochemical industry because they could then have produced raw materials for their pharmaceutical industry, and therefore they couldn't suffer much as far as the health sector is concerned. So it's very good to hear that Apple is sensitizing fellow countries in Africa to be able to think, and we have to think very quickly. Because unless we take deliberate steps to add value, our population may be able to absorb the petrol that we'll be producing. But then even at that, we'll still have excess crude, and who will buy that? So these are issues that I'm hoping we'll consider as part of our deliberations here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Memam. Before we hand over to Dr. Ibrahim, I just wanted to add a very short, brief question. You mentioned about the ICOM, I think it is called, the investment, the African Investment Corporation or something, I think it is. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that properly. But what I'm trying to say is the investment body that has been put together. I understand it was suspended some times ago. Is the suspension been lifted? I think it was suspended. It was moved to Egypt or something like that. And then, so I was just wondering, I guess the purpose of that institution is to raise funds since the oil industry is capital intensive, to raise funds to help the individual countries to become capable of manning their own oil industry, at least in some ways. Because what we have now, as you have correctly said, is basically the expatriates coming to extract the products, and they give us some small commission and they take the rest with them. So maybe if we have, if we can build capital through contributions from the individual African countries, will that be something that will help in the industry, or what is the purpose of these particular efforts in that direction? So thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. So back to you to please address some of the issues that have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edobo, and thank you, Dr. Monico, Monico, and Nnaji, for your very penetrating questions and observations. I start with a question from Dr. Tanosha. What is Apple doing to change the realities that I enumerated in the course of my speech? Quite a number of things have been done. and we are doing them as quickly and as aggressively as we can. In terms of technology and the development of local content on the continent, we have now created the forum of heads of research institutions of our member countries. And we hold meetings quarterly where the various research institutions in our member countries' heads and the relevant directors come to exchange thoughts and plans and programs. We do the same thing at the head of national oil companies level. This is quite apart from what we do at the executive board and the ministerial level that just focus on policies and government. No, these are technical people that come to discuss the challenges and propose solutions, which are then taken up to the policy makers. What do we do with the reality of lack of funds? Because let's face it, for the industry, it's a very, very capital-intensive industry. If you don't have the capital and you don't have the technology, you're a non-starter. You may have the capital, you may have the technology. If you don't have the right manpower, again, you are as well as a non-starter. So, in terms of finance, I mentioned the Africa Energy Investment Corporation. We consider the founding of ICOP and the success of ICOP very critical to the success of Apple. Because one, in the past, until fairly recently, we all rushed overseas to the World Bank, to African Development Bank, to European Bank, and many private investors for money to come and invest in the hydrocarbon sector in Africa. With the decision in 2015 to discourage the use of hydrocarbons and the policies of many critical countries that control global finance to sanction governments and institutions that provide funding to hydrocarbon energy prospecting or production, we have come to say that, look, if you don't do anything about this, that 100 billion barrels you have in your ground, you'll end up having to drink it, or it will become what we call a stranded asset. It is there, but it's no use. Therefore, we have founded the Africa Energy Investment Corporation. Let me make it clear, the Africa Energy Investment Corporation really wasn't founded 2 years ago. No. When Apple was founded in 1987, in 1994, they created the African Petroleum Producers Organization Fund for Technical Cooperation, APA Fund, with the headquarters in Cotonou. It is this same organization, investment institution that we changed completely. Because in 1994, when APA Fund was created up to 2 years ago, it was 100% owned by the government of APA member countries. And in the reformed Apple, we said, no way, governments are not good in running economy. Government, if you still want to be part of it, you are going to be a minority shareholder. We are going to bring in private investors who are going to put their money in the system, and they are the ones to really drive the vision of this corporation. So right now, we are going around getting subscriptions from member countries, but like I said, they are just putting in the seed capital, but the biggest part of the funds are going to come from private investors within and outside Africa. it is a corporation that targets developing the energy sector in Africa, but it is not limited to African countries. We have been discussing, for example, with Africa. They've shown interest in investing in ICOP. So when we come to this, a lot is being done. Equally, we have come to see that perhaps if what we are saying is as serious as it is, that look, in the next 10 to 15 years, 20 years at the most, your oil may not be as lucrative as it is today. You have no guarantee that oil will sell at the price, even half the price it is today, 62 or 64 yesterday, maybe 40, maybe 30, maybe less, depending on how technology is able to make renewable grow, and not just the growth of renewable, but also how technology is able to make for greater energy efficiency. Because the critical thing is not just the growth in the energy component, but also how efficiently people come to use it. So these are the two issues that are outside our control, and we are working on that. We have, as a result of that, decided that, look, beyond the executive board, beyond the Council of Ministers, we have now also created what we call the Summit of Heads of State and Government of APO member countries. And what we are trying to do today is to bring as many countries in Africa that have oil, even if not a lot, to join us. The reason is this: we have come to believe that we can't make progress or much progress if we keep developing our energy sector in silos. If you want to have maximum benefit of your resources, make sure that from Nigeria, that resource is available through Cameroon, through Congo, through Brazzaville, through everywhere. If you develop a petrochemical industry, develop one that can serve more than 2, 3, or 4 countries. When you do all of these things, you then are able to have regional markets. And when you do this, believe me, in the next 25 to 35 years, when your oil doesn't have a market outside, the African population is going to be over 2 billion in the next 30-something years by 2050. Come on, for God's sake. We have so many people. All you need is to empower them. While you empower them, you should also work to make sure that you don't go too much against what the global paradigm shift against fossil fuel. The world is not against fossil fuel. What they are saying is they are against greenhouse gas emissions. Fine. Let us develop the technology that will make fossil fuel, particularly oil, a lot more environmentally friendly. There is technology that will do this. And we are saying that if oil was not say found in the Middle East, but in Europe and America, we are very sure that the world will not be talking about energy transition. What the world will be talking about is to intensify research to make oil and gas environmentally friendly. Because then they will argue that there is abundance of this oil and it is cheap and it is reliable and it's all the beautiful things can be said about it. All we need is to develop the technology. And they say that necessity is the mother of invention. It brings me back really to how do we leverage technology. Really, this is one of the ways that I think you guys out there, Nigerians in diaspora, have a role to play. Some of the best scientists we have in the world are Nigerians, whether it's in computer, whether it's in oil or anything. We can boast of the best Africans, particularly Nigerians. Many of you have left because the environment dictated that. If the right environment is created, every one of us, I was one of you before, create the enabling environment, there is no better place than home. These people will come and they will be able to develop the technology that will make you to be able to start exploration to distribution. Because the same people that are doing this in Shell and ConocoPhillips, they are Nigerians, they are Africans. Of course they are, they are small, but give them the environment and they'll be able to do that. So, what we have always said, and thirdly, I think, as we make the energy transition from now to 2020, 2030, 2040, we should be ready to open our doors to the best, whether they are Africans or non-Africans, if they are ready to come and impart their skills, their education, their technology to us. Not the international audience. Identify the people, bring them, let them be part of your team that will help develop these technologies. And I guarantee you we shall be able to make quite some progress. Now, on the future of the oil and gas industry, okay, Dr. Ajay has asked about, I want to say that we have commissioned a study on the future of the oil and gas industry in Africa in the light of COVID-19 and COP21. I think COVID-19 last year really floated us. All along we had known that we are terribly dependent on one economy. Everybody was oil. And all of a sudden, oil in the world, for a short period, they say, come and take the oil and I'll give you money to go with it. It happened in history last year, in April, early April. And nothing stopped it from happening again. And all of a sudden we realized that, hey, things are not going to remain the same. What then do we need to do? What is our faith in view of COVID-19 and the determination of the world to move on with the energy transition? What we have failed to understand, I think, is that for the short period, 4 years of the Trump administration, if you recall, the Paris Climate Change Agreement was took place in middle of December 2015. Just immediately after that, of course, that was during the Obama administration. Trump came and he said he doesn't know anything about it. The mere fact that the United States withdrew from that program dampened the spirit and the speed with which that program was going to go. And for 4 years, we were kind of, what we had feared didn't come to pass. The current administration, and especially the advisor on climate change matters, we are going to see a big change. The drive will be greater, the aggression will be greater, and we have to also get to move faster. The way to do this is for us to come together, establish petrochemical industries across the continent. I mentioned that you can have big petrochemical plants, 2 or 3 in the West Africa sub-region, 2 or 3 in South, in the East, in Central Africa, and so on. So that if a country like Niger, that today produces 20,000 barrels of oil, but has the capacity to produce 3 times, 4 times more, but is unable to because it doesn't have means of evacuating its crude oil. But if you have a big petrochemical plant that says Niger, Chad, Nigeria, you just need to do 200 or 300 kilometers of pipeline. Bring it there, and it will be refined and petrochemicalized. Everybody will be happy, and the whole sub-region will develop economically. The same thing we plan to do in the east of Africa, in Central Africa, and in North Africa. So we are looking at ICOP being a body that will help mobilize resources for the creation of infrastructure, energy infrastructure that cuts across countries. ICOP is not going to invest in Nigeria or in Cote d'Ivoire. No, it is going to make investment that cuts across countries so that it will help with integration, economic integration of the continent. So basically, I think that is it. Pipeline, Africa Energy Investment Commission, like I mentioned, Dr. Jones were asking whether it's the old one or the no. ICOP was created just about 2 years plus ago, but it was a reincarnation of the African Alpha Fund. But we have changed it so much. Instead of being a wholly sovereign institution, sovereign being government owned, now the governments are going to be minority. All the governments are going to constitute just one, and then minority, and then private investors, Europe, America, everywhere, just come in, and we will be happy to have your funds if you believe in our cause. The headquarters of the organization currently is in Cotonou, but like I said, it was a political decision. At the end of the day, when we have gotten our right shareholders, it will be these people that will determine whether Cotonou is the most attractive place to put an organization that is going out to bring the best in terms of capital. Which African capital can best attract financing, funds, etc. These are things that will be decided by the board, not the government of African member countries. Governments of African member are just shareholders. If the shareholders agree with them, fine. If not, whoever controls the organization will be the one that will determine where we go. Finally, I want to say that seriously, with 100 billion barrels of oil in our ground, and more points are being made, if we don't act and act fast, we seriously risk a situation where in the next decade or so, our people will still be in darkness. Yes, we have oil that we can bring out. We shall lose potentially, even if we say 50% of these proven reserves can be brought out. We are talking about 50 billion barrels multiplied by, even if you say half what it is today, that is $32. Do the arithmetic and see whether Africa can afford to lose this money at the stage we are today. So basically, I don't know if I've answered the question or I have skipped any, but I'll be happy if I have missed anything, just remind me.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you for the detailed answers you have given. By the way, the participants, you can also ask questions, but you need to raise your hand so that we know that you intend to ask a question. There is a tool at the panel where you can click in case you want to add something so that we don't overlook you. So the panelists, is there anything anybody wishes to add to what Dr. Ibrahim has already said?
From my own end, I can say that Dr. Faruq has actually done good justice to the questions that I posed. When we get to maybe to another stage of the conversation, we'll then need to expatiate a little bit more to explore more your idea or remark that the diaspora, the African diaspora, is doing incredible things out there in the world, and there is need to exploit their potential and engage them and get them doing things homebound. And we actually look forward to that possibility of engagement also with Apple to see what we can do for you to, pursuant to your noble objectives that you've set for this organization. So when we get that stage, I hope you're going to enumerate, express what's on your mind as options for mutual engagement. I'll rest here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kokwo. Dr. Tanosha, anything you would like to say at this point?
Thank you, Dr. John Edobo. This is quite groundbreaking in terms of looking forward. I just want to reemphasize what Dr. Faruq mentioned about petrochemicals, then cleaner fuels. There are efforts in that direction, I believe, in Nigeria, but we need to speed up. I just want to also mention that on the panelists, among those in attendance, some key people from the Ministry of Science and Technology. There is also, just to mention, sir, there is also people who are already taking strides in this direction from diaspora. There is Professor Sonny UK in South Africa, who is good with renewables and is working on how to use hydrocarbons in a more cleaner ways for to mount renewable platforms. Another person that is key to the World Energy Forum, a key member, is Professor A.S. Sani Sambo is on this program and is on the World Energy Forum and is key in terms of renewable energies, but not moving far away from hydrocarbons, which is a key resource. But one thing I need to also emphasize is that I think Dr. Omar Faruq Ibrahim also mentioned that in passing is the opportunities that are prevalent, that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown. There is more use of disposables, which are plastic components, and there is more use of disposables, and these are opportunities moving forward. Disposables, which are more mainly from plastic components. So the emphasis on petrochemicals is key. Establishing hubs with international hubs within the African countries is a powerful one. But we must remember that we need a lot of training and education moving forward. The idea of having our engineers trained abroad or our scientists and our nationals trained abroad and then retained abroad, there must be a way to incentivize them to come back to Africa, especially those in diaspora, and invest, not just patriotism. There must be a way. That's why ICOP, you mentioned ICOP, ACOP, it should be more strategic. I'm happy that you said it's no longer a government-driven organization, rather it's an enterprise-driven organization. We can key into that. For example, in FUPRI, my university, Federal University of Petroleum Resources, what we did moving forward in 2015, 2016, we established FUPRI Energy Solutions Nigeria Limited because we already had this vision that there's going to be an energy transition. How are we going to prepare for that transition? How do we make crude oil more relevant in terms of as byproducts in petrochemicals, and also how do you turn them more to more cleaner? There are efforts in the transport section. How do you use more of gas? Currently, in the next 20 days in the UK, our partners will be doing trials using trains, the 30% diesel and then 70% LPG. to drive the trends, and that will cascade to Nigeria. I think that is the direction Dr. Faruq is looking about. How do we make it more available and cleaner, and also petrochemicals? But most importantly, just for emphasis, the COVID-19 has presented some opportunities. How do we leverage on that in terms of in-country and in-continent utilization of capacity? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tanosha. Dr. Memam, is there anything you would like to add at this point, at this stage?
Yes, it's good to know the follow-up elaboration that Dr. Ibrahim has made, has given greater clarity to the presentation as well as focus. While we are looking at other options, I'm happy that we all recognize the huge population we have in Africa. A few days ago, PwC, one of their directors, mentioned that by the end of this century, Nigeria will be the second most populous nation on earth after India. So we'll even overtake China. So that is a huge population and therefore a market. So there is still room for the refining. We need to get our products refined locally so that we begin to consume this product in continent, like the speaker has said. In terms of the petrochemicals, I was going to ask whether the Apple has a plan to draw on a pool of scientists, engineers of African descent, both internally and in the diaspora, to marshal a plan for this, using the petrochemicals as an example. But of course, we also have to look at other technologies. Or is Apple planning to leave this to the individual oil producing countries? I think if we are able to draw on the professionals, whether in continent or outside the continent, we'll be able to have a holistic discussion and a dispassionate one also to say, well, which of these countries give us a comparative advantage in terms of whatever technology we want to deploy. Thirdly, we should be looking at gas because gas is quite a very clean energy. So this is an area that is not affected by the COP21 and all of these changes that are coming up. But I do know that Nigeria is emphasizing on gas. But again, we can look at not just utilizing the gas for cooking and energy. That also, of course, is a feedstock for the petrochemical industry. And actually, Nigeria is a gas-producing nation. It's not an oil-producing nation. We only happen to produce oil, but predominantly we are a gas-producing nation. So we need to look into that. Finally, I think we rather than trailing behind the rest of the world, maybe Apple should be discussing with member countries in terms of also beginning to look at other forms of renewable energy, in particular energy storage in the forms of batteries, solar energy, and so on. Otherwise, down the line, maybe our children, our grandchildren will now be again struggling to catch up with the rest of the world in these areas. So while we are thinking of how to maximize the utilization of our hydrocarbons, we should also have at the back of our mind, whether from a research and development point of view, to say, well, look, let's begin to prepare for this and have research centers that will also look alongside into other forms of renewable energy, so that that aspect of the society is now understanding what the rest of the world is in that area. And so that when it comes to harnessing that, especially solar energy, which we have in abundance, we will not have a problem with that. As an example, I think earlier this week, the chap from Sokoto State, who was one of the chief designers for General Motors in the US, that came back. I read in the news that he designed an electric car, which he took to his governor, the governor of Sokoto State, earlier this week as a demonstration. So I think we need a hybrid of all of this. So it's not focusing on oil and gas alone. We also need to begin to see how we can draw and prepare, get ourselves equipped with other technologies. Meanwhile, I really want to thank the speaker. It's an excellent presentation, and also it has stimulated a lot of discussion, which may even go on beyond this webinar that we are having. Thank you.
Well, very thank you, Dr. Mamam. Before we give the opportunity to any of the participants who may want to make any contribution, I would just like to add just a few thoughts. I will take Nigeria as an example. Dr. Ibrahim is an expert in Nigerian oil industry. So let me leave the other African countries out of the discussion for a moment. The Nigerian oil industry has made a lot of income from even though they are mainly joint ventures, but the royalties they have received along the years have been enormous. So I wonder, why is it not been possible, or what would you advise? What should be done to raise capital? The Nigerian Petroleum Corporation, which you know very well, basically all the money that come into the oil industry is shared by the different arms of government. So nothing can be saved, you know. Will it not be wise to advise government to say, put a percentage of the revenues into a fund with which we can finance some of the things we are talking about here, petrochemical industries, and even refinery, and so on, as even exploration. We still don't do our own exploration, despite the fact that the NNPC has been around for so many years. We have not been able to build enough human resources to do that. What is hindering us from really achieving these things after so many years and so much income, revenues that we have vested from these joint ventures? So I just wanted to add that. And finally, before you answer, to also ask you, we are having problems with refining. I know that one of our speakers here is very passionate about the issue of artisan refinery. Will that not be also a way out, since our big refineries are not working? I don't know the position of Apple on that. I just wanted to add that to the list of questions you have. So is there anybody from the public, from the participants, who has a contribution to make? Please, you have to raise your hand so that we know that you wish to say something, so that I can take you on board. I've not seen anybody who has raised his hand so far. So I will go back now to Dr. Ibrahim in the meantime to continue with his response to the issues raised by the panelists. Thank you.
Let me make it very clear. APO is not a government. It's an organization made up of currently 15 member countries and with 3 other countries. Ours is essentially advisory, and what we are trying to do, I mentioned our effort now to introduce a body or an organ called the Heads of State Summit. Currently, the highest organ of decision making we have is the Council of Ministers. And we believe that by institutionalizing the Heads of State Summit, and I believe the first summit was scheduled to take place in July last year, but COVID prevented it. And this year, the Republic of Congo is looking into the possibility of hosting that. We believe that it's one forum that we can use to get our heads of state to understand the importance of bringing in experts from the continent that have gone out and have been excellently well. So this is something that we definitely believe we can bring to their attention, and it will be up to each member country to devise its own strategy. We can give what we will say general guidelines to assist. So I wouldn't talk of what we cannot do. I'm just saying what is within our power. Now, I just talked about gas being a fairly clean energy. Yes, gas is a fairly clean energy. But I can tell you, gas is still energy of transition. Once we finish with coal, with oil, the attack will now be on gas. It's a relative thing. It's coal, the worst, oil, second, and then gas of the list in terms of environmental steps. But seriously speaking, gentlemen, if you look at the conversation globally, even though we are all agreed that coal has the worst footprint, you don't hear much about coal. People are talking about oil. There are developed countries that are still using coal, and they are working hard to make coal less and less, more environmentally friendly, let me say. Ideally, the fight should be eliminate coal, eliminate oil, then eliminate gas. But the attention today has been oil, oil, oil. And that is why we feel that for our country, if we go the way that these people are asking us to go, we are going to be left with assets in the ground that we can't use because we have gone and signed an agreement that we didn't sit down seriously look at the implications to our country, to our generation and future generations. So there's a lot of politics in this. Now, Apple should be talking about other forms of renewable too. Definitely, the fact that I have been emphasizing the need for cleaner fossil fuels does not mean that we don't believe in other forms of energy. The world, with its current population and projected billions more in the next few decades, will need a lot of energy. I just mentioned a while ago that on the African continent alone, we have over 600 million people who do not have access to modern energy. And a lot more of them even cooking, which what we shouldn't be using to cook. So the world needs energy, and it is good to take all that will be available, whether it is renewable or clean energy, we need them. Africa, let me make it clear, Apple is not fighting renewable. What we are saying is that while you go to develop renewables, please don't say that it's going to be at the expense of our own. If you say you want to increase renewables by 20%, we'll clap for you. But don't say that we are going to reduce oil use by 20%. What we want you to do is to say that you will help to develop the technology that will reduce the environmental hazard of oil by 20%. We'll be happy with that. But to ask me to reduce my production by 20% without giving me a substitute, and you trained me for 50 years to rely on this commodity. I mean, let's be very fair to each other. So really, what we believe the world can do with a lot more energy, the more the merrier. But today, God has blessed us with oil, and we would not want that oil to become stranded asset. Dr. Jones, why have we not been able to raise the right capital? Why do we? We make so much, we produce millions of barrels a day on the African continent every day. Why don't we take a bit of it and invest to do what we believe is a laudable project for this generation and future generations? And we give an example of Nigeria. I don't know if you heard Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's lamentation from years back. No, even fairly recently, after she became DG. These are people who believe in today. They don't believe in tomorrow. And that, to be honest with you, gentlemen, is part of the problem of liberal democracy in Africa. When you are appointed or you are elected a governor, and you know you have 1 term or 2 terms, you have no guarantee that when you start a project that should take 3, 6 years or 10 years to complete, if you invest in that project, your successor will continue with it. You come to Africa, there are so many abandoned projects everywhere. I'll give you a very good example. In 1979, Japan started this rail project, metro in Lagos. The military came, the first thing they did was to stop it. After a lot of money had been invested, pillars and roads, 30, 40 years after, we have come back to do the same thing at a price that is just crazy. It is the same thing you see not just in Nigeria, but in many Africa. For the politicians, they live for today. Very, very few politicians think beyond their elections. And that is why in Nigeria, for example, as you rightly noted, Dr. Edobo, every month, the Ministry of Finance, NNPC, Budget Office, and the government, the state government, they send their finance ministers or accountant general. They sit and they ask how much was made from oil. There is already a sharing formula. Federal government, take this year. State government, take this year. Local government, take this year. Oil producing communities, take this. By the time they have finished, before the government, the state government, they have already budgeted that money. Nobody is looking at saying that, look, when this money comes, you must save 10% for the future. We started the sovereign wealth fund. It is what it has been. It hasn't grown. Because as soon as the state government find that there is money, what we call excess food, they will jump at the federal government, or give us our money. And this is exactly what Dr. Okonjo-Iweala was saying. The money comes in, but our consumption pattern is such that we don't look beyond today. We want to look at today, and we get everything. Now, you were asking why can't Nigerians explore? No. Let me make it very clear again. There is a lot that African countries have achieved in terms of progress in the industry. the exploration of oil and gas, especially in the inland basin in Nigeria, really a lot of them are being done by Nigerians. Yes. So with Nigeria, but I won't say the same thing about other African countries that are just coming into the industry. And that is why we believe that it is important to, for these countries, the new entrants, to collaborate with other countries that have been in the business so that the know-how that these countries have can be imparted to the new ones. Because in the next 15 years, like you said, believe me, you will not get that technology from Europe and America. Because if they, first of all, currently, they are not spending money on research anymore. Which means we are not making progress. And in the next 20 years, what I think we are going to do is go and bring anybody that has become expired, because his expertise is no more needed by those countries. Whether it's a European or American, just bring them to Africa and give them a deadline. Look, in 5 years or so, or 10 years, we want, no, less than that, because we can't continue looking at 10 years. In the next 2 to 5 years, we want to identify some people, give them, let them become experts, and we shall pay you this much. I think that is one way Africa can make progress in this. Now, you talked about modular refineries. Some African countries, Nigeria, again, I believe you're specifically talking about Nigeria. In fact, Nigeria already has modular refineries operating, and I understand a lot more are in the process of coming into operation. In the next 2 years, I think they expect to have up to about a dozen modular refineries, especially in the areas where oil is produced.
Well, thank you very, very much for those explanations and detailed answers to the questions. Is there anything that the panelists would like to add? Because I can't see any of the participants raising their hands to ask any question. So the panelists, is there anything you would like to ask before we move on to the final? Okay, I can see Dr. Bashekola has raised his hand.
Can I make a comment then, please?
Yes, go on, please.
Okay, yeah. I'm glad Dr. Ibrahim mentioned the consumption pattern, especially not looking ahead in terms of financial planning by the leaders in Africa. As an example, I will, in 2013, for example, Angola and Nigeria combined produced more oil than Norway. But as of 2013, Norway had $715 billion in their sovereign wealth fund, while Angola had 5 billion naira, making it the 47th in terms of ranking that time for that year. Nigeria, on the other hand, had only $1 billion in our sovereign wealth fund. Who knows, maybe that money has been drawn out actually. So just to put things in perspective, as of 2013, Nigeria and Angola combined produced more oil than Norway. But Norway, as of 2013, had $715 billion in their sovereign wealth fund. Actually, they don't touch their oil money. The money they get from fishing and another sources of income is what they use to run their governments. So if we produce 3 times as much oil as Norway, and yet Norway had more than 100 times the amount of money they had put in reserve in their sovereign wealth fund than Nigeria and Angola combined. So we have a problem. We have not been planning for the future, and now the rain came too early last year with COVID and the price of oil falling, and everyone is running helter-skelter in terms of where to get money. So I thought I needed to mention that to augment what Dr. Ibrahim mentioned in terms of our lack of financial discipline, our lack of financial planning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just struggling to see if I can get the people who have raised their hands. I don't know why, I just can't get them on board. I'm so sorry about that. Bashekola, the chairman of NIDO Europe, you have raised your hands. And Fred, okay, has also raised his hands. But unfortunately, I can't get you on board. So please forgive me. I'm sure we are going to try to rectify that before we have our next event. Said something very important. I think Dr. Ibrahim also mentioned that the indiscipline we have been experiencing, we have in Nigeria has been a big challenge. We don't know how to save. We just consume everything. Because we do that, and he also said, if we are unfortunate, we may be unable to even get the oil we have still not extracted yet. We have the reserve, but the demand is falling and falling. It may happen to us that we have the oil, but we can't get it out to even sell to anybody because the demand is no more there. So we have to make hay while the sun shines, as they say, which we are not doing at the moment. We consume everything, and then we go borrowing all over the place. And so it mentioned that as well. I just wanted to say that you are very correct with your observation. You know, I would have loved to take in people who are raising their hands, but this thing is not working. So I'm very sorry about that. So, okay, I think in view of this, I would suggest that we probably get into the final round so that we don't overstretch this, so that we don't start repeating our statements and questions. Okay, anybody who has a question can ask it via chat, please, and I can read that out. I think that might be a way out. So if you have a question, please post it, and I will read it out to the guest speaker and the panelists. So post your questions if you have any, just a few questions so that we don't overstretch the meeting. Okay? Okay. There's already the first question. I think the first question is, does Apple intervene in the regulation of crude oil pricing amongst member countries? And then the next question is from Ngozi Iwuchukwu. How can someone be a member of where? A member of Apple, or the question is not quite clear. Madam Ngozi Iwuchukwu, can you formulate your question properly? Okay, of Apple. How can a country become a member of Apple, of APPO? So the first question was from whom? Okay, I can't see from whom that was. Okay. Does Apple intervene in the regulation of crude oil pricing amongst member countries? I think, well, I will leave that to Dr. Ibrahim to answer. But I think, as you all know, pricing is not done by each country. That is something that is done on the international basis. OPEC is involved, and you also have other, factors that also play roles here. But I will leave that to Dr. Ibrahim, who knows OPEC very well, who knows the market and the environment very, very well. So these are the two questions that have come now. Please, if you don't mind, to just respond to those questions.
Basically, in Norway, how much you save or you keep in your country is a function of how much of that technology is in your country versus imported, how much of the funds that were used in the whole process of finding production were raised internally or borrowed capital. And then the question of consumption happens. For most African countries, the contracts that they entered with IOC or any companies that come to do business with them, seriously, if you look at it, you'll find that it's so unfavorable. If you talk about a country producing 2 million barrels a day, that country will be very lucky if they are to just share the barrels, not the money, to have 50% of that crude. Very lucky. Some get 30%. Some get much less. Our neighbor here. So, when you are borrowing at rates that you don't think about because you're planning to bring foreign investment, or you bring people with technology, you're flying to the next 2, 5, or 10 years, you're just looking at the immediate. These are the consequences. So, in the case of Norway, most of these things, whether it is technology, or it is the money, or even the human resources that do this, they have developed them. I'm talking of real local content. In most of Africa, it's not so. They bring the equipment, they do the work, and when it is time to take it, and they charge us by the day. That is it. When these people are the ones exploring and producing for you, they also tell you, they dictate to you how much they spend in the production process. So seriously speaking, unless you come, African countries come to master this industry, they will continue to get much less than what they deserve to get. And of course, like I said, in Nigeria, talk to them, why are we not saving the money? They say, we want to show dividends of democracy. And dividends of democracy means spending money. If you don't spend money, there is no dividends of democracy. Now, does Apple intervene in crude oil pricing of member countries? No. Apple, unlike OPEC, is not interested. I won't say it's not really interested, but there is a difference between OPEC and Apple. OPEC has taken upon itself a global responsibility for ensuring the stability of the global oil market. They want to ensure the stability. They don't want to see volatility. And for the last 51 years, this is what they've been doing. They stabilize the market in the interest of everybody, those who are in the market, in the organization, as well as those who are not. In Apple, with our less than 10% global production, what can we do? No. Especially that our members constitute the majority in OPEC. So we don't need to found an organization that's no. OPEC is doing an excellent job of what it was set out to do. What Apple is doing is that there are peculiar challenges of the industry. That there are challenges of the industry that are peculiar to Africa. And it is these peculiar challenges that we want to address, complemented in this by OPEC and by other international energy organizations. So we don't talk about price, but we support OPEC in its effort at stabilizing the global oil market. If you remember, last year when OPEC and non-OPEC, as well as even America, came together to bring some sanity into the global oil market. Apple was the first organization to come out with a statement supporting the actions of those organizations. How can a country become a member of Apple? Simple. If you are an oil-producing country on the African continent, or you have proven oil reserves but have not yet started producing, and you indicate interest and share the mission and vision of Apple, you apply, and the Ministerial Council will review and give you membership.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. The other question that I read that you just answered was actually from Madam OT. And there's another question. We are rounding up now, so we are now in the final round now. A question came from Fred. Okay. So he's saying, I don't know whether it's a comment, just a observation or a question, but I'm going to read it out. My question and opinion is with regard to the need for more emphasis to be placed on petrochemical plants in order to harness more benefits from domestic refining of crude oil in Nigeria and Africa at large. How can African countries participate more in the downstream sector without limiting ourselves to just domestic refining? This question is from Engineer Wilfred Okologume from FUPRE. There's a final question also from somebody. Let me just add that before we don't take. Okay, how often does Apple member countries meet to deliberate on issues that affect them? This is necessary in view of what Dr. Ibrahim said about building petrochemical plants across Africa, not as individual countries. This is from Shuks Undodim. So these are the two pending questions. So anybody who asks anything to add, please do it now because we are rounding up now. I don't want us to finish and then somebody says, I would have liked to ask a question. I didn't have the opportunity. So please do so now because we are rounding up now. So Dr. Ibrahim, do you want to address those two questions? Okay, so Madam Rita, I think Ogoshuku says, does Apple make input in the governance and control of activities of the oil companies in Africa? For example, oil spillage in the Niger Delta has been a persistent issue in Nigeria. So does Apple make input in the governance and control of activity?
Madam Rita, Apple is an organization of sovereign countries. Apple respects the sovereignty of its member countries. And Apple does not interfere in the governance of its member countries. What we do is we conduct studies and bring to the attention of our member countries how other countries have done or have solved problems, but not to direct them, do this or don't do this. That is the sovereign right, and this is normal with all interests, so we don't interfere. We advise. How often does Apple member countries meet to deliberate on the issues that affect them? This is necessary in view of what Ibrahim said about building confidence. There are three organs, policy-making or decision-making organs of the organization. Critical. The executive board, it meets twice in ordinary session, but it can meet up to 10 times in extraordinary session. This year alone, for example, we've already had 3 extraordinary meetings. But our regular ordinary meeting will take place in May in the last quarter of the year. The regular meeting, second quarter, and the last quarter. But in between, if the need arises, we call extraordinary meetings and cases. Similarly, our ministers meet once a year. But if the need arises, we call extraordinary meetings. This year alone, we called 2 extraordinary meetings. The last one was on the 11th of last month. So the Head of State Summit that I mentioned is planned for before the end of this year. The host country's president is to send out the formal invitation. Consultations have been going on to find the most suitable time that most or all member countries' heads of state will attend. These are the governing bodies. Then I have also mentioned there are bodies like the Forum of Chief Executives of National Oil Companies of the of member countries, as well as Forum of the Directors of Research Research Institutes of our member countries. So these are the places where decisions are made, some technical, some political, and others policy oriented. Does Apple make input into the governance of? I think this is the same.
So thank you very much. I think now we have taken enough questions. I would go back now to the panelists to please make their final statements before Dr. Chief Kunkwo will make the vote of thanks so that we can round up. So Dr. Mamam, I'm sorry. Could you want to make a final statement, please?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. It has been a wonderful discussion, and it's been very illuminating. For me, the takeaway is that we all recognize that we have to do something and do it quickly in terms of harnessing the resources, the hydrocarbon resources of Africa. And an effective way of doing that is to add value to the maximum level, not just in terms of refining, not just in terms of low-level petrochemicals, but petrochemicals at the highest level, while looking at how we can also exploit our gas, which is not bound by the environmental challenges or limitations that are being imposed currently globally. Thank you again. I want to especially thank the speaker, Dr. Omar Ibrahim, for a wonderful presentation.
So thank you very much. Can I call on our Dr. Tanosha to please make his final statement, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. I want to first commend you for this initiative. Dr. Omar Faruq Ibrahim, thanks for the learned points. Again, regards from the chairman of the Governing Council of FUPRI, your friend, Professor Abdullah Zuru. He sent his regards to you. And I just, on a quick note, I just want to mention that since Nigeria is currently doing a review of the PIB, what would be your, as a final closing remark, what would be your advice to the federal government of Nigeria in terms of policy and enabling law, looking at the present realities, most especially now that the PIB is being reviewed? And then finally, I want to say to the convener and also to the panelists that institutions like FUPRI, Federal Institute of Petroleum Producers, are available to drive the R&D, research and development aspects, so that we can have more in-country utilization of capacity, especially in refining, an integrated approach in terms of downstream and upstream sector of the petroleum and energy industry. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tanosha. Dr. Kunkwo, I think I will call upon you now to please do a vote of thanks. But before you do that, I want to also thank Dr. Ibrahim. I'm not taking your vote of thanks. I just wanted to, for his readiness to be here today, despite his commitments and his engagement and his schedules. So I really appreciate your time you have spent to do this, so thank you very much. But Dr. Okonkwo will do now is, yeah, before he does it, so I'm sorry, Dr. Okonkwo, I want to also please mention the Nigerian Global Roundtable has a lot of resources. I'm sure Dr. Okonkwo is going to repeat that. Bear in mind that we can really collaborate with you in many areas, you know, from the diaspora. So, Dr. Okonkwo, sorry if I've taken anything you wanted to say. Please go on.
Okay. Thank you, Jones, for giving me the mic. I really want to say before I continue that it is very difficult for me to reconcile the remark that the African oil industry lacks human resources capacity. Having listened to Dr. Omar Faruq, he is a wonderful testimony that that Africa has a lot of human resources. So it is my privilege once more and honor to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the Nigerian Global Roundtable after this wonderful, wonderful interaction today. Dear Dr. Omar Faruq, Secretary General, head of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, we thank you in a very special way for taking the time from your very busy schedule to attend this interactive webinar of the Nigerian Global Roundtable on African Petroleum Producers Organization and the challenges of the African petroleum industry. You have done an excellent job on that. Like many other organizations around the world, the APO definitely went through unusual times, considering the global impact of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns and the dramatic crash of global oil price, which is on the rise again, which is also a testimony that organizations like Apple have been working behind the scene to make sure that they understand, they reintroduce or restore the high price oil regime. We have discussed a number of issues and we have noted that Apple has been devising strategies to shift the dependency of the economies of member states from oil to gas. We have discussed and found out that Apple has been promoting investments in alternative energy sources, promoting the utilization of petroleum as a catalyst for energy security, sustainability development, and economic diversification in Africa. We have also noticed that Apple has been addressing the issue of indigenous technologies and self-sufficiency in the continent through investment in R&D and innovation of alternative energy sources. Apple has also been alleviating the environmental degradation of oil producing communities. Kindly note, therefore, that the Nigerian Global Roundtable is appreciative of all these good things Apple is doing. The Nigerian Global Roundtable further encourages Apple to also focus more on the African Continental Free Trade Association Agreement, African Continental Free Trade Agreement, in order to prepare for the challenges and opportunities that will arise from this project. We encourage you to keep an eye on that. With these highly creative activities, the Nigerian Global Roundtable has no doubt that Apple will continue to excel in executing its primary mandate, which is to promote cooperation among its member countries and and global institutions in the field of hydrocarbons, to foster fruitful collaboration and partnership with utilizing petroleum as a catalyst for energy security, sustainable development, and economic diversification in Africa. And we also notice that you want to be the world's reference and lead institution on Africa's hydrocarbon matters. These are your strategic objectives. In view of the above, Dr. Faruq, The Nigerian Global Roundtable can facilitate the achievement of these strategic objectives by, for example, identifying international best practices in the West and replicating them to Apple for advisory services to your member countries, even in the position as consultants. We can also devise and offer Apple a messaging system, because we noticed that one of your strategic objectives is to make your organization more visible. So we can devise a messaging system for enlightening targeted audience of interest on the good things Apple is doing and on the opportunity Apple brings to the table in global energy matters. I would like to mention at this stage an app called All for Cars, which has been specifically developed for hydrocarbon logistics, distribution, marketing, monitoring, and market integration. This is, for example, one of the resources that the diaspora can put to the disposal of Apple to be advised to member countries to use. I would also, at this juncture, also mention to you that one of the greatest problems of the African petroleum industry is the overdependency on parts, components for servicing our downstream installations like refineries. You notice that almost all the refineries in Nigeria are moribund, are redundant at this time. And one of the reasons why they are redundant is because they cannot service the parts. They cannot operate JIT just in time. They have incredible downtime, and they can't source for parts. I can also inform here that we have one of the persons who is powering the German 3D technology industry. He's a Nigerian, Professor Brando Okolo. He alone he has the capacity to reinvent and to restore the integrity and ability and capacity of the African petroleum downstream sector by deploying his 3D additive manufacturing process in the production of components for the industry. Even in your advisory capacity, I think that Apple can collaborate with the NGRL, that's Nigerian Global Roundtable, in working on these solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, please, on behalf of the Nigerian Global Roundtable and the entire audience, let me strongly propose this interaction becomes a sustainable one. That is our interactive session today, that it becomes a sustainable one and not to be a one-off event. Please join me in congratulating and appreciating the presentation of Dr. Faruq today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. A vote of thanks, Dr. Konko. Before, I think you have said everything. Well said. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim, for your being here today. But before you go, I think it is just fair to just read just two more messages to you. There are also words of gratitude from the chairman of the Nigerian diaspora, Dr. Bashir Bashekola, who wrote, thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. It is obvious that all African countries need to develop the value chain of the oil sector so that they can maximize the benefit of the natural resources. Then it says, thank you also to the panelists. And then I think Dr. Fa Punka wrote, I want to also appreciate all the panelists for the good job done and to the speaker, of course. So thank you, Dr. O.F. Ibrahim, all the panelists and participants who participated at this webinar. So good job. Thank you all there. That's from Veneral Imade. So basically, everybody is saying thank you to you for coming and to the panelists for also being here. So thank you so much, except you want to still say something. Otherwise, the meeting is coming to an end now. Do you want to say something, Dr. Ibrahim, before you have the final word and then we round up? So it's over to you, Dr. Ibrahim, in case you want to say anything before we round up.
Let me also thank you, Dr. Edobo and Camilo, Dr. Jimaman, and Monico, as well as the participants who are not panelists. I really appreciate the opportunity given to us in Apple to come and make this presentation and also to clarify issues about the organization. Let me quickly, I was asked, what advice will I give the Nigerian government in view of the PIB? I will say that if you had asked me this question 20 years ago, when the PIB was first conceptualized, the answer I would have given you is radically different from what it is today. Because in the 20 years since the conceptualization of PIB, a lot has changed in the industry. 20 years ago, I would have said, go for the higher, go for the, today, I would say, do all that you can to get your oil out of the ground, that's 37 billion that you have, and get a fair return on it and minimize to the barest minimum. Bureaucracy. You can't afford to delay the PID anymore. Make sure you pass it, even if it's not perfect, it's not excellent, it's no perfect law anyway. Make sure it is better than what it is today. That's all. Now, Apple will be happy to sustain this dialogue because we believe sincerely that we have in Nigerians and diaspora, Africans and diaspora, really a group that we can always run to, that can tell them, hey, you're going the wrong way, come back. People who are confident, who are knowledgeable, who can really say you can't go this way. It won't help you. It won't help the continent. And on this, I really thank you for the offer for us to come to you anytime we need your support and your guidance. One of the biggest challenges African leaders have had is to sit and think that they know everything. No. Even if I know, I want to know more. And I really, really would appreciate your support. Whether I come to you or I don't come to you, if you hear what you're doing and you think it's not right, you have a stake in Africa. Thank you very much.
Well, I really want to thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. I don't want to forget to also thank the panelists, Dr. Anjem Edobo, thank you so much for the time you have spent here. And Dr. Tanosha, thank you also for the time, that you have spent with us this evening. Dr. Camillus, of course, and all the people, the participants who have not had the opportunity of speaking. We thank you all for being here this afternoon. And so thank you and goodbye and good night. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.